The Centurion Emperor's left antenna twitched, never a good sign, especially when attempting to negotiate intergalactic peace. The assembled diplomats, representing 17 spacefaring civilizations, collectively held their breath, or whatever passed for breathing among their species, as they watched the most powerful being in 3 spiral arms process the sight before him. Diplomacy had rules. Diplomacy had protocols. Diplomacy most certainly did not involve watching a human ambassador stroll into the crystal chamber of eternal harmony, wearing what appeared to be combat boots caked with red Mars dust. "Your Imperial Magnificence," drawled the human, managing somehow to make the formal address sound like a casual, "Hey, buddy. Hope you don't mind if I skip the traditional 7-hour greeting ceremony. My knees aren't what they used to be, and Earth's got this thing called Netflix I'd like to get back to." The Rigelian ambassador, resplendent in their ceremonial phase-shifting robes, nearly fainted. The Andromedans' crystalline forms vibrated in frequencies suggesting extreme distress. Even the usually unflappable Proxima Centauri delegation's bioluminescent patterns shifted to what could only be described as mortified purple. This wasn't how things were done. The Galactic Diplomatic Corps had spent centuries perfecting the art of taking simple matters and complicating them to the point where no one remembered what they were arguing about in the first place. That was proper diplomacy. But humans, as the galaxy was learning, had missed that particular memo. They'd burst onto the interstellar scene barely a century ago, armed with nothing but audacity, terrible puns, and an inexplicable ability to make friends with the most dangerous predatory species in known space. Their official first contact message had been, "Hey universe, got any coffee out there?" The Emperor's right antenna joined its left in twitching. His iridescent exoskeleton, typically a calm blue-green, began shifting toward infrared, a warning sign that had sent lesser species running for their evacuation pods. "You dare," the Emperor's translator matrix conveyed, "to enter the sacred chamber of eternal harmony without completing the purification rituals of the 17 moons." The human ambassador shrugged, a gesture that caused several junior diplomats to cover their visual senses in horror. "Well, your emperorship, I did try. But your ritual master kept insisting I needed to meditate in zero gravity while reciting poetry in ancient Centurion. I'm afraid I'm allergic to both. Poetry and zero gravity gives me horrible gas." A collective gasp echoed through the chamber. The Arcturian delegation began recording their final testimonials, convinced they were about to witness the start of an interstellar war. But that was the thing about humans. They had this peculiar ability to turn diplomatic disasters into unexpected victories. Perhaps it was because they were the only species in known space that considered winging it a valid strategic approach. The human continued, seemingly oblivious to the diplomatic apocalypse they were causing. "Besides, I brought something better than ritual purification." From their decidedly non-regulation jacket pocket, they produced a small brown package that emitted an aroma that made the Emperor's antenna straighten in curiosity. "Coffee," the Emperor's translator squeaked, royal dignity momentarily forgotten. "Better," the human grinned. "Chocolate-covered coffee beans, straight from Earth's finest purveyor of legal stimulants." And just like that, the tension in the room shifted. Because if there was one thing the galaxy had learned about humans, it was that they had an uncanny knack for knowing exactly what gifts to bring, even if they couldn't remember which ceremonial bow to use to save their lives. The Emperor's exoskeleton shifted to a contemplative violet. Perhaps we could discuss the matter of the Orion trade routes over these coffee beans." "Now you're talking," the human said, pulling out a chair with a screech that made several diplomats wise. "But first, let me tell you about this fascinating Earth custom called Casual Friday." The assembled diplomats watched in horror as the humans settled in for negotiations. This was either going to be the shortest peace talk in galactic history, or the beginning of something entirely new in interstellar relations. Probably both. The conference room of Supreme Galactic Understanding, named by an intern who clearly had aspirations for grandiosity, buzzed with nervous energy as various species attempted to process the unprecedented situation unfolding before them. The human ambassador had not only survived the first hour without causing an interplanetary incident, but had somehow managed to get the Emperor to try what they called a fist bump, a gesture that had the Imperial Guards reaching for their quantum disruptors before realizing their sovereign was voluntarily participating in this bizarre Earth ritual. "So you're telling me," the Emperor leaned forward, antennae vibrating with interest, "that humans actually invented faster-than-light travel because they were, and I quote your historical records, tired of waiting for pizza delivery from the good place across town?" "Well, that, and we really wanted to know if anyone else out there had figured out how to make decent tacos," the human replied casually, propping their feet up on a nearby hover chair. "Turns out the answer is no, but the Betelgeuse come close with those fluorescent slug wraps of theirs." The Betelgeuse representative brightened to a pleased shade of ultraviolet. Meanwhile, the diplomatic protocol AI was having what could only be described as a nervous breakdown. Its processors were overheating, trying to calculate the number of violations occurring per minute. The current count stood at 147, and that wasn't including the human's persistent habit of using finger guns to emphasize points. "But surely," the Proximan ambassador interjected, their crystalline form refracting light in patterns of diplomatic concern, "you understand the gravity of these negotiations. The future of 3 galactic arms hangs in the balance." The human paused in their attempt to teach the Emperor's personal guard how to do the wave, an Earth sporting event tradition that looked alarmingly like a coordinated attack pattern to most species present. "Oh, we understand gravity just fine," they grinned. "We grew up with it. Unlike some folks here who evolved in zero-G and think walking is some kind of extreme sport." The Alphean delegation, who indeed considered bipedal locomotion to be an extreme sport, rustled their levitation fields indignantly. "The point is," the human continued, "all this formality isn't helping anyone. You've got 17 species here who haven't made any progress in negotiations for what? 3 standard cycles. 3 cycles, 4 rotations, and 17 microsegments. The protocol AI corrected automatically before adding, "And please remove your feet from the 3rd sacred chair of contemplation." The human obliged, only to prop their boots on an even more ceremonially significant piece of furniture. "See, that's exactly what I'm talking about. You're all so caught up in the proper way to arrange your tentacles during the 7th sub-phase of preliminary discussions that you've forgotten why we're here in the first place." The Emperor's exoskeleton shifted through several contemplative colors before settling on a thoughtful move. "And why, according to humans, are we here? To figure out how to stop shooting at each other long enough to establish a decent interstellar food delivery service, of course." The human pulled out another package from their jacket, which by now several species suspected was secretly a portable dimensional storage unit. "Anyone want to try a Twinkie while we talk about real solutions?" The Arcturian ambassador, who had been maintaining a dignified silence, couldn't contain their curiosity. "What is this Twinkie?" "Only the most artificially perfect food item humanity has ever created," the human said proudly. "It's got a half-life longer than some radioactive elements." The protocol AI nearly crashed, trying to determine if that was a joke or a threat. "But before we get to snack time," the human's tone shifted slightly, though their relaxed posture didn't change. "Let's talk about why the Centurion Empire really closed the Orion trade routes. The temperature in the room dropped several degrees as the human continued. "It wouldn't have anything to do with the Proximan mining operations in the Horsehead Nebula, would it? The ones that are supposedly decommissioned, but are still showing up on our long-range scans." The Proximan ambassador's crystalline form clouded over, while the Emperor's antennae went rigid. "Oh yes," the human smiled, pulling out a datapad with one hand while unwrapping a Twinkie with the other. "We might be new to the galactic scene, but we've got really good satellites and a really unhealthy habit of sticking our noses where they don't belong. Speaking of which, who wants to hear about this fascinating backdoor deal between the Regelians and the Andromedans?" Several delegates began shifting uncomfortably in their seats. The human's casual demeanor suddenly seemed less like diplomatic incompetence and more like a carefully orchestrated performance. "But hey," they continued, taking a bite of the Twinkie, "we're not here to point fingers. We're here to figure out how everyone can get what they need without resorting to the galactic equivalent of passive-aggressive sticky notes on the break-room fridge." The Emperor's translator took a moment to process that metaphor before giving up entirely. "You knew," the Regelian ambassador's phase-shifting robes rippled with realization. "All this time, Zrenia, while we were judging your species for its lack of protocol, we were gathering intelligence, building a comprehensive understanding of galactic politics, learning exactly where all the metaphorical bodies were buried." The human grinned. "Let's just say Earth's reality TV shows aren't the only thing we're good at producing. We also excel at what we call homework." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. The human had walked in appearing to break every rule of diplomacy, while simultaneously holding enough sensitive information to reshape the political landscape of 3 galactic arms. "So," they continued, pulling out yet another Earth snack, "who wants to start talking about real solutions? I've got a whole bag of M&Ms, and I'm not afraid to share them." The Emperor's exoskeleton shifted to a color that hadn't been seen in diplomatic proceedings for 7 centuries, the royal shade of "let's actually get something done." "Perhaps," the Emperor's translator conveyed, with what sounded suspiciously like respect, "we should discuss these matters in a more direct manner." "Now you're getting it," the human beamed. "But first, has anyone here ever heard of something called Casual Friday? Because I've got some suggestions about dress code reforms that could revolutionize galactic diplomacy." The protocol AI finally gave up and initiated a complete system restart, but not before recording one last observation. Humans didn't just break rules. They made you question why those rules existed in the first place, and somehow that was more dangerous than any weapon they could have brought to the negotiating table. Explaining the concept of Casual Friday to a room full of species who measured time in quantum fluctuations was proving to be the least of the diplomatic challenges. The real excitement began when the human decided to demonstrate what they called proper negotiating posture. "You see, your imperialness," the human explained, boots now firmly planted on the edge of the crystal table of paramount significance, a name that made even the Emperor roll all 4 of their eyes. "Sometimes you need to make yourself comfortable to think clearly." The table, crafted from crystallized star cores and considered one of the most sacred artifacts in the known galaxy, emitted a faint hum of what could only be interpreted as distress. "This is unprecedented," the Andromedan representative's voice modulator crackled with alarm. "That table has witnessed the signing of over 10,000 peace treaties." "And how many of those treaties actually lasted?" the human asked, unwrapping something they called a Mars bar, which disappointingly contained neither actual Mars material nor any trace of astronomical matter. The uncomfortable silence that followed was answer enough. "Exactly," they continued, offering a piece of the chocolate to the Emperor's guard, who accepted it with what appeared to be religious reverence. You've all been so busy maintaining proper diplomatic posture that your spines, or exoskeletons or energy matrices, no judgment here, are too stiff to bend toward actual solutions. The protocol AI, which had finally rebooted after its earlier crisis, immediately began calculating the probability of imminent war. Its processors started smoking when the human casually flicked a chocolate wrapper into what turned out to be an ancient ceremonial burning bowl. Did you just dispose of confectionery waste in the sacred flame of eternal truth? The Proximan ambassador's crystalline structure was vibrating at frequencies usually reserved for natural disasters. "Oh, is that what that is?" The human glanced at the now slightly cocoa-scented eternal flame. "I thought it was one of those fancy space ashtrays. Speaking of which, has anyone here tried Earth cigars? No? Your loss." The Emperor, whose antenna had been twitching continuously for the past hour, suddenly emitted a sound that sent the entire diplomatic corps into panic mode. It took several moments for everyone to realize that the sound was, in fact, laughter. In 3,000 years of ruling, the Emperor's translator struggled to keep up with the unusual vocal patterns. No one has ever dared to be so refreshingly direct. Well, someone had to do it. The human shrugged, pulling out a data pad. "Now, about those trade routes. I've got this crazy idea involving what we on Earth call a timeshare system. You see, instead of fighting over who gets to use the hyperspace lanes, why not treat them like a vacation rental?" The Rigelian ambassador's phase-shifting robes briefly solidified in shock. "You propose to treat the sacred pathways of interstellar commerce like some sort of tourist accommodation? Why not? Works for condos in Miami." The human paused, noting the blank stares. "Right, Earth reference. Let me break it down in galactic terms. Everyone gets scheduled time slots, maintenance costs are shared, Zrenia, and we set up a nice little rotation system. Plus, we throw in some bonus features like priority booking for emergency aid and cultural exchange programs." Cultural exchange. The Arcturan delegates' bioluminescent patterns shifted to indicate intellectual curiosity. "What sort of exchange?" "Glad you asked." The human's grin widened as they pulled up a holographic display. "See, Earth's got this thing called food trucks, mobile cuisine stations that could easily be adapted for interstellar travel. Imagine Taco Tuesday in the Horsehead Nebula, Wings Wednesday near Betelgeuse. You want to turn our sacred trade routes into a food delivery network?" The protocol AI was now officially running out of categories for diplomatic infractions, among other things. "Yeah, because here's what I've noticed about you folks." The human leaned forward, boots squeaking against the ancient table. "You've got all these amazing technologies, these incredible capabilities, but you're so wrapped up in tradition that you've forgotten how to actually enjoy any of it." The Emperor's exoskeleton shifted to a shade that the translator matrix identified as contemplative with a hint of amusement. "Look at the Proximan mining operations," the human continued, causing several delegates to flinch. "You're literally harvesting stardust, which is incredibly cool, by the way. But instead of using it to benefit everyone, you're hiding it behind bureaucratic paperwork and secret deals." The Proximan ambassador's crystalline form clouded over with what might have been embarrassment. "And you," they pointed at the Andromedans, "have developed quantum communication that could revolutionize galactic internet speeds, but you're sitting on it because of some ancient protocol about information purity. The sacred protocols of data transmission are not to be taken lightly," the Andromedan representative buzzed indignantly. "Neither is my inability to stream Earthcat videos this far from home. But here we are." The human pulled out another snack, something called Doritos. that immediately caught the attention of several species with enhanced olfactory senses. "The point is," they continued, distributing the orange triangles with the air of someone dealing diplomatic trump cards, "we could be doing so much more if we just loosened up a bit. Share resources, exchange ideas, maybe even have some fun while we're at it." The Emperor, who had been quietly crunching on Doritos throughout this speech, raised all four hands for silence. The chamber went still, save for the occasional crinkle of snack wrappers. "You suggest," the Imperial translator conveyed, "that we abandon thousands of years of diplomatic tradition in favor of, what did you call it, chilling out?" "Not abandon," the human corrected, reaching for their boots. "Evolve." Speaking of which, the entire chamber held its breath as the humans slowly, deliberately placed their feet directly on the Emperor's personal section of the crystal table of paramount significance. Several guards reached for their weapons. The protocol AI began playing its final runtime sequence, but before anyone could react, the human spoke again. "Did you know that on Earth, some of our best deals have been made with feet on tables? We call it getting comfortable enough to get real." The Emperor looked at the boots, then at the human's face, then back at the boots. The entire galaxy seemed to pause, waiting for the inevitable explosion of outrage. Instead, the Emperor did something that would be recorded in diplomatic histories for millennia to come. They placed their own appendages, all four of them, on the table. Then the Emperor's translator conveyed, with what sounded suspiciously like amusement, "Let us get real." The collective gasp from the assembled diplomats could have depressurized a small moon. But as the human began laying out their detailed plans for galactic cooperation, complete with references to Earth concepts like food courts, public transportation, and something called happy hour, a strange thing happened. One by one, other delegates began to relax their formal postures. The Rigelian ambassador's robes stopped phase-shifting quite so nervously. The Proximan's crystalline form took on a warmer hue. Even the protocol AI seemed to be processing events with less catastrophic predictions. Because somehow, in breaking every rule of galactic diplomacy, this human had managed to do what countless formal negotiations had failed to achieve. They had made everyone stop posturing long enough to actually listen to each other. And if that meant putting boots on ancient tables and turning sacred trade routes into interstellar food delivery networks, well, perhaps the galaxy was ready for a little change. History would later record this moment as the Great Relaxation, though several species still insisted on calling it the Sacred Table Incident. What happened next would reshape a galactic politics forever, all thanks to a pair of dusty boots and some well-timed snack distribution. The Emperor, still with all 4 feet propped up, was now enthusiastically discussing the possibility of converting certain ceremonial spaces into what the human called food courts. The concept of getting multiple cuisines in one location had apparently struck a chord with the multi-tomped monarch. "And you say these mole cops maintain order in such establishments?" The Emperor's translator struggled to convey the mixture of fascination and disbelief. "Well, they mostly just ride around on segways and tell teenagers not to loiter," the human explained, causing another minor translation crisis. "But I think we could adapt the concept. Instead of ceremonial guards, we could have customer service representatives." The Imperial guards exchanged worried glances, perhaps envisioning their sacred armor being replaced with name tags and cheerful uniforms. But the real breakthrough came when the human introduced their final concept, the Universal Food Rating app. "Think about it," they said, projecting a rough holographic mock-up. "Every species gets to rate and review establishments across the galaxy. We unify peace through gastronomy, want to prevent interstellar war, make sure everyone knows where to get the best nebula noodles in the quadrant." The Andromedan representative, who had been quietly processing this information, suddenly lit up. We could integrate our quantum communication technology to provide real-time updates, and our mining operations could ensure premium ingredient delivery. The Proximan ambassador's crystal structure sparkled with excitement. The protocol AI, which had given up on maintaining order, began calculating the probability of peace through pizza. The results were surprisingly positive. But what about our sacred traditions? The Rielian ambassador's robes swirled with concern. Our ancient protocols? Keep them, the human said, surprising everyone. But maybe update them a bit. Like instead of a 7-hour greeting ceremony, how about a nice dinner party? Same formal recognition, but with better snacks. The Emperor's exoskeleton had shifted to a previously undocumented color that the translator could only describe as enthusiastically optimistic. "We shall call it," the Emperor announced, "the Great Gastro-Diplomatic Initiative. Or just Space Yelp for short," the human added with a grin. And just like that, centuries of rigid diplomatic protocol were transformed. The sacred trade routes became bustling corridors of cultural exchange, with food trucks leading the way. The crystal chamber of eternal harmony was renovated to include a coffee shop serving both regular and quantum-stabilized varieties. The Imperial Guards did end up getting new uniforms, but they drew the line at wearing flare buttons. Conclusion: years later, a plaque would be installed in the newly renamed Casual Friday Chamber, commemorating the day when a human's boots changed the face of galactic diplomacy. Below it, in smaller text, was a quote that became the unofficial motto of the new era. "Peace comes not from perfect protocol, but from shared meals and propped-up feet." The human ambassador went on to establish the first Intergalactic Food Critic Association, though they were eventually banned from reviewing Baljusian restaurants after an incident involving hot sauce and a quantum physics violation. The Emperor kept a pair of boots mounted on their personal wall, a reminder that sometimes the best way to reach new heights is to put your feet up. And somewhere in the vast bureaucracy of space, a protocol AI finally learned to relax, though it still sent out passive-aggressive memos about proper snack disposal in sacred flames. As for the boots that started it all, they were ceremonially bronzed and placed on permanent display in the galaxy's first combination museum or food court, where visitors can still see them today, right next to the Emperor's favorite taco stand. Because, as it turned out, the secret to universal peace wasn't in perfectly executed protocols or carefully measured gestures. It was in knowing when to kick back, prop up your feet, and offer someone a snack, even if that someone happens to be the most powerful being in 3 spiral arms, especially